ELI5 How do we know that the Great Pyramids were not built by slaves but by paid workers? Archaeologists also found the worker villages with their garbage. And the garbage tells us that they ate very well and had relatively good working conditions. They found evidence for beer, meat, bakeries for fresh bread and other high-value food. Slaves would have eaten mostly cheap gruel and bread and lived in less spacious quarters. My favorite is the record of a work stoppage protest due to contract violations caused by inadequate supplies of makeup and beer. There's documentation, literally accounting records for accommodation, food, even types of food. You can see how much garlic they ate, and pay for the workers, the seasons they worked, etc. Accounting was among the first impetus to develop writing both in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Some of the earliest surviving written records are bills, receipts, and transaction records. Accountants have historically always had the best documentation. If you want to follow history, follow the money. They kept the receipts. Not kidding. There is literally paperwork, papyrus work, around who was paid what. Plus, as mentioned, lots of graffiti and records kept from the time of the construction. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that some pyramids were built with slave labor, or that they had slave teams doing part of the work on some projects. But most of it was definitely paid labor and skilled stonecutting work. To add to other great answers above, we have archaeological evidence of the housing they were living in, which indicated they lived up to decent standards for the time and that they received medical treatment even for injuries that would make them unable to work. Basically, we have their accounting books. And spending on wages just looks different than spending on forced labor. Even 5,000 years ago, we have records indicating a skilled engineer was respected and lived well. From this we can extrapolate that the teams breaking rocks in the sun with big hammers and the teams dealing with the feces of thousands were also not slaves. Some of the most plentiful and well-preserved artifacts from antiquity are things like ledgers and receipts. We have a lot of ledgers that show where the materials to build the pyramids were sourced, how they were purchased, and what labor was hired to build it. Besides that, the labor required skilled carpenters and masons was pretty advanced for the time. So we're talking about skilled labor, not unskilled labor. We also have primary sources from the people who built the pyramids who talked about not only being paid, but also being fed meat and beer, luxuries in a lot of societies. I'm thinking it was more of a combination of both, those that enlisted, and those that were enslaved. Slaves could have been donated towards the cause. They were considered property, so for their masters it was probably seen like a tax break.